Another year has come and gone, and I don't know about you, but my 2023 was pretty fantastic. A lot of that stems from the fact that this was my biggest year for roller coasters by a wide margin. I was able to pick up 92 new credits throughout the year, boosting my count from 106 all the way up to 198. On top of riding some world-class coasters for the first time, I also got to revisit some of my old favorites, and my opinions have changed for a lot of them. And in this video, keeping with the tradition that many coaster enthusiasts follow, I'll be revealing my top tier of my current coaster rankings. Welcome to CLT Coasters. My name is Josh, and these are my top 25 roller coasters as of 2023. Having just under 200 credits, a lot of great coasters weren't able to make the top 25, so I thought I'd throw in the first 5 out as honorable mentions. From 30 to 26, these are Jersey Devil at Six Flags Great Adventure, New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas, Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia, Candymonium at Hershey Park, and Millennium Force at Cedar Point. These are all a lot of fun, but they just missed the cut. With those out of the way, let's get into the actual list. We start at number 25 with Orion at Kings Island. Its cousin Millennium Force may have come up short of the official list, but Orion was able to squeeze in. It doesn't have too many elements, but what it does have is very high quality. Being a B&M Giga, it's got one of the best first drops in the world, and the airtime moments, whether they're taken straight or sideways, are all excellent. And given its degree of smoothness and comfort, Orion is endlessly re-rideable, and it remains my favorite Giga in the state of Ohio. Our first new entry slots at number 24, King Dakar at Six Flags Great Adventure. As of 2023, it's the tallest roller coaster in the world at 456 feet, and I was extremely impressed by the ride's size and power. The 128-mile-per-hour hydraulic launch leaves your soul behind, and the skyscraping top hat has multiple seconds of sustained floater airtime in the front of the train. Admittedly, it's not very smooth, probably the roughest coaster on the list, but it's nowhere near a deal-breaker. I would love to see Intamin's newer lap bars in place of the ride's over-the-shoulder restraints, but it's still good enough to grab a top 25 spot in its current state. And before anyone flames me in the comments, now would be a good time to mention that El Toro was closed on my visit to Great Adventure. Coming in at number 23 is Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. This is my favorite coaster in the park, and for good reason. It's incredibly forceful, especially for a B&M Hyper. The first few hills are just okay, but the narrative changes as soon as you hit the helix turnaround. You're slammed with positive G-forces as you spiral downward before hitting a flurry of camelbacks, each with stronger airtime than the one before. It's without a doubt one of the better coaster finales out there, and as far as B&Ms go, it's remarkably uncharacteristic. Now, if it could just get repainted, I'd die a happy man when that happens. Number 22 is Copperhead Strike at Carowinds, one of my hometown favorites. This launch coaster from Mach is a sample platter of just about every type of force in the book. From 5 inversions brimming with hang time to some snappy airtime hills and transitions, the ride always seems to be doing something new with every passing element. It also manages to be one of the best themed coasters in the United States, with a pretty nice queue as well as a show scene before the first launch. Aside from an inconsistent rattle and some rather weak launches, Copperhead pretty much nails everything, and I was honestly tempted to rank it even higher. At number 21 we have Raptor at Cedar Point. This is my favorite B&M in Ohio, and it's certainly one of the company's more intense installations. All 6 inversions are chock full of positive Gs and whip, with the 0G roll and Cobra roll stealing the show. And all the blood in your body will rush straight to your legs in that crushing double helix finale. Some of the transitions can be a little suspect, like the turn into the final brakes, but otherwise the track work is very smooth. I'm without a doubt one of this ride's biggest fans, but as much as I love Raptor, it's no longer my favorite inverted coaster. It's been dethroned by Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa, which lands at number 20. This ride takes the intensity of a Batman clone and supersizes the layout, complete with 7 inversions and a whole lot of trench dives. Every bit of Montu is insanely forceful, especially the double inverting Batwing and the sequence after the mid-course, and it honestly made me nauseous after each ride. But I kept going back for more, and it was always worth feeling a little shaken up. And after close to 30 years of operation, the track work is still smooth as glass. Number 19 is Kumba, also at Busch Gardens Tampa, which may be controversial because many seem to like it less than Montu. Montu is far smoother and more unique, but there's something about an old B&M sitting coaster that just does it for me. No gimmicks, just 7 ruthless inversions including one of the greatest 0G rolls in existence. I would love to just lap this coaster all day long, which could be feasible given its location in the very back of the park. I'll have to try that in 2024. Needless to say, I'm extremely happy those Kumba removal rumors were not true. But my favorite B&M looper is still Incredible Hulk at Universal's Islands of Adventure, which falls at the number 18 spot. I only got to re-ride this once in 2023, and while it felt less intense than I remembered, it still blew me away with its power. With a punchy launch and 7 snappy inversions, it's beastly enough on its own, but the addition of the onboard soundtrack really enhances the ride's energy. And being at a Universal park, the theming adds a lot to the overall experience. Hulk really stands out from the other B&Ms in the best way, which allows it to rise above the rest for me. Next up at number 17 is one of America's most underrated roller coasters, Texas Stingray at SeaWorld San Antonio. Anyone that calls this a weak GCI really needs to reconsider, because this is a top tier wooden coaster and currently one of my top 3 coasters in the Lone Star State. The ride offers a great twister layout, and it kicks off with one of GCI's only straight first drops before charging through a sea of airtime hills, some of which are off axis. These are amplified by those comfy Millennium Flyer trains, which I have no problem getting room with to really feel those forces. SeaWorld, if you're watching this, please build more wooden coasters like this. I'll be your best friend if you do. Just edging the previous coaster out is Mystic Timbers at number 16. This is my favorite ride at Kings Island, and it's basically like if Texas Stingray had an out and back layout instead of a twister. As a surprise to no one, this is also an airtime machine, with plenty of fast-paced floater pops and the occasional touch of lateral Gs. The main thing that boosts Mystic ahead of Texas Stingray is the elaborate theming, specifically inside the eerie shed after the final brakes. It gives this ride a phenomenal atmosphere. I was lucky enough to get 7 rides back in 2022, but you'd better believe I'm craving the opportunity to get back for many more laps on this wooden masterpiece. Coming in at number 15 is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This is my new favorite B&M Hyper by a long shot, and it's a floater airtime factory. Just about every single element finds a way to send you levitating, with an incredible first drop and some of the company's best camelbacks being the highlights. And the Lift Hill soundtrack is just the icing on the cake. It makes the whole experience feel like a great adventure. It's without a doubt one of the most re-rideable coasters I've ever done, and of all the great B&Ms in Florida, Mako ended up being my favorite. From graceful airtime to raw positive Gs, number 14 takes us up to King's Dominion for Intimidator 305. This is one of the only coasters I've ridden that proved to be too much for me, but this Intamin Giga still lands deep in the top 25 for its sheer power. The first turn in particular even made me pass out on my very first ride. Then the second half is laden with some of the snappiest transitions in the world that are sure to leave you seeing stars as well, while the ejector-filled first drop throws in some strong negative Gs to round it out. While I don't rank it quite as high as some others, this coaster's nature makes it pretty undeniable, and it was a worthy 100th credit for me. Let's keep the breakneck pacing trend going with number 13, Wonder Woman at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I was lucky enough to catch this RMC Raptor just before it closed for refurbishment in June, and I loved every second of it. It's over in a flash, that's for sure, but so many of these elements try to throw you to the moon. The first drop and drop off the turnaround specifically leave your soul in the dust with some unreal ejector airtime. Fold in 3 solid inversions and you've got one of the best prototype coasters ever built. If I had to nitpick, the ride is kinda shaky, but hopefully its refurbishment can smooth things out on top of enhancing its reliability. At number 12, we have one of my most recent winners of the year, Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. When I first rode this in April, I was pretty disappointed, but my latest rides in November completely redeemed it for me. There's so many great moments to be found here, including some amazing forward and backward airtime plus a boatload of hang time on the ride's 2 inversions. And given how comfortable Intamin's over-the-shoulder lap bars are, it's no wonder why Pantheon is such a crowd pleaser. If you can, try to get on this at night. The ride area is pitch black, and I'm sure you'll be having the time of your life flying around in the dark. From here on out, every entry you'll see on the list falls into an elite tier of roller coasters that I would give a perfect 10 out of 10. Not many attractions are able to break into this group, so the fact that these are here really says a lot about their quality. With that being said, let's keep the party going. For the 3rd year in a row, Thunderhead at Dollywood tops my wooden coaster rankings, and it lands all the way up at number 11 overall. If you were to ask somebody what their favorite ride at Dollywood is, there's a good chance they would respond with Lightning Rod. But in all honesty, Thunderhead is just as good, if not better. This is firmly my favorite GCI, and it's endlessly aggressive from start to finish. There's so much airtime, the pacing is so fast, and if you end up sitting in the back row with a loose lap bar, oh boy, you're in for a real treat. It also finds the perfect balance between smooth and rough, which I find to amplify the intensity. There's seriously no going wrong with this one, and I'm glad it's finally been getting some well-deserved praise. Kicking off the top 10 is Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. In my eyes, this is the king of the Texan coaster scene. It's short, no doubt about that, but every part of this ride delivers big time. The airtime lateral combo on the first drop is world class, and the drop off the quarry is killer too. And don't sleep on the portion atop the wall, there's some really sharp pops of ejector up there. Throw in an awesome 0G roll and you're set. This one gets bonus points for having those Gerstlauer trains, which are so much more comfortable than RMC's own rolling stock. Just please, Iron Rattler Ops, don't staple me, bro. At number 9 we have Maverick at Cedar Point. This right here is a prime example of why Intamin is the king of the multi-launch coaster. It's intense, it's snappy, it's butter smooth, and I cannot get enough of it. The ejector airtime is super powerful, specifically on the first drop and first camelback, as are the laterals on those low-to-the-ground snaps and stangle dives. And it boasts one of the best magnetic launches out there with that second one inside a tunnel. Outside of having bulletproof vests for restraints, and understandably so, Maverick is just about perfect. I just really can't justify placing it any higher as of now. Next up at number 8 is my favorite coaster in the state of Virginia, Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. I was able to get another lap on this in 2023 and it was just as good as I remembered from last year. The quantity of airtime is just insane, especially when you consider the ride is only 111 feet tall, and basically every form of it is represented. Quick pops, sustained moments, off-axis moments, upside-down airtime. This layout leaves no inch of track unused. Funny enough, this is also the ride's biggest weakness. Since there's so many airtime hills, the ride ends up feeling pretty repetitive. What it has is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I do prefer a little more variety. Still elite, just not quite a transcendent experience. Number 7 is neck and neck with Twisted Timbers, but I ended up giving Lightning Rod at Dollywood the edge. It doesn't have the raw power of some RMCs, but at least prior to having its launch removed this offseason, Lightning Rod still brings the heat. That uphill launch was a great opening statement, and it's a shame that it's merely a memory now. The stuff in the middle is kinda lame in the morning, but a lot better when it's warmed up. But no matter the time of day, that quad down never fails to steal the show. This is actually one of the few RMCs that I prefer in the front as opposed to the back, since the elements seem to pop more up there. We'll see if it continues to pop with its new chain lift next year, but until then it stays in my top 10. The ever-polarizing Skyrush at Hershey Park finds itself at number 6 on this list. Obviously, I'm on the positive side of the Skyrush debate. Honestly, I can hardly think of any real downsides to this ride. I love the restraints, sue me, and the positive Gs, airtime, and laterals are all extremely strong, especially in the back on a wing seat. And of course, it's got my all-time favorite first drop that tries to fling everyone to the moon. Some complain about it having a really bad rattle, but I thought it was really smooth for such an aggressive ride. Then again, it has been 3 years since I've ridden Skyrush, but I'm hoping to change that in the near future. At number 5 is the world's best Giga coaster, Fury 325 at Carowinds. A lot of people tend to get bored of their home park coasters, but I can't imagine how anyone could get tired of this. The layout is so strong, the elements are so addictive, it's one of the most crowd-pleasing rides ever built. There's such a strong sense of speed, the airtime is some of B&M's finest, even some of the turns manage to be truly exceptional. And of course, it's still super smooth and comfortable thanks to those amazing trains. In my eyes, this is still B&M's masterpiece, and it's going to take a monster to knock the crown off its head. It's still only number 5 on my overall list, but I could gush about Fury all day if you let me. Okay, deciding the order for these last 4 was such an insanely difficult task. These coasters are all best in the world material, but I think I've gotten the order right. So here we go, at the number 4 spot we have Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. This was my number 1 coaster last year, and even though it's fallen, it's still very much a world beater. The sheer quantity of elements this ride has is just astounding. It's like a giant version of Twisted Timbers. Ejector airtime everywhere you look, a few 0G rolls to spice up the party, and almost a minute and a half of ride time from the first drop to the brakes. Steel Vengeance doesn't feel like it should exist, and yet we're lucky enough that it does. So why isn't it number 1 anymore? Honestly, it just doesn't have the variety to move any higher, but I still adore this thing, and I wish Cedar Point was closer so I could ride it more often. If you had told me a few years ago that I'd have a Fun Spot attraction breaking into my top 3, I probably would have accused you of heresy. But here we are in 2023 with Air Force 1 at Fun Spot Atlanta claiming the bronze, and I actually had this a spot higher for a very long time. I got 11 laps on an evening in July, and with every ride it just kept getting better. The layout is one of RMC's very best, from its 4 fantastic inversions to basically every variety of ejector airtime in the book. And the way it holds its speed the entire time is just madness. It tends to be too much for some, but I love every little thing about Air Force 1, even its supposed imperfections. And since it's at a place like Fun Spot Atlanta, bagging a whole bunch of laps in a day is super easy. The fact that the park built this will forever blow my mind, and I'm so happy they did. But of the 10 RMCs I've ridden so far, Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa is my favorite, and it's all the way up at my number 2 overall. My first rides on this in June were just mind-blowing. It's so incredibly fast-paced, carrying its speed throughout the entire course and ripping through elements in ways I've never seen before. The airtime is some of the best in the game, and just like Area Force 1, there's plenty of variety in the forms this airtime takes, only Gwazi's elements are much larger and even more twisted. The wave turn over the entrance in particular is probably the best element on any of the company's coasters. Throw in a couple inversions including the amazing death roll, plus my favorite RMC first drop with its 91-degree angle, and you've got an absolute masterpiece. As long as it took the part to convert the old Gwazi into a hybrid, the finished product was worth every second and then some. I wouldn't argue with anyone who calls this the best coaster in Florida, but for me it's a very strong runner-up. That's because Velocicoaster Islands of Adventure has fought its way back to my number one spot. This was my favorite coaster in 2021, and my rides this summer reminded me exactly why it deserves to take the gold. The theming and presentation are just immaculate, and they give the ride an atmosphere of excitement that no other ride can match. And the coaster itself is the picture of perfection. There's so much variety in this layout, with 2 punchy launches, incredible airtime moments, and the strongest lineup of inversions I've ever experienced on a single coaster. This includes my favorite element of all time, the Mosasaurus roll, which I could just gush about all day long. The pacing is a thing of beauty. Not as breakneck fast as something like Iron Gwazi, but Velocicoaster bides its time and makes the finale in particular extremely satisfying. And on top of all this, the whole experience is super comfortable thanks to Intamin's new gen trains. In short, I'm not sure if there's a coaster on American soil that can beat Velocicoaster right now. It's the complete package in every way. That finishes out my top 25 roller coasters as of 2023. This was an amazing year for me, but I've got even bigger plans in store for 2024. I'm super excited to expand this list next year, but until then, I'd really appreciate if you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Those are the best ways to show your support. And be sure to check out CLT Coasters on Instagram, links in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Take care everybody, and Happy New Year.